What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Today's going to be a bit of an update, as well as just kind of the forecast of when we're going to start seeing the system and the season start ramping up, because we have a tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa right now, and we have the ITCZ continuing to fire up in the northern hemisphere over here around 10 degrees north. So we're going to have to pay attention to that, but we're noticing a lot of convection too across much of the Caribbean, across the Gulf of Mexico, across the Bahamas as well. Those are definitely appear to be of tropical origin, but those don't look like they're going to develop. But it is definitely something to pay attention to, because what that's ultimately going to do is it's going to help moisten up the atmosphere quite a bit and prime it up for hurricane season right there. Let's go ahead and show you the true color imagery to kind of see what we're potentially looking at. At this current point in time, you're seeing more Sahara dust starting to push into the subtropical and tropical Atlantic from Africa right there. However, as I've been saying before, this does look like one of the last bursts of Sahara dust right here. We can actually go ahead and show you what we were kind of taking a look at in the last 24 hours. So let's go ahead and do about 144 frames back just to kind of show you what we're potentially looking at. You're probably not going to see it during the night. You can see it a little bit, but you're not going to see it during the night. And then you have that happening at that current point. And then you start seeing the Sahara dust kind of more pronounced at this current point. We've been talking about it since yesterday. We finally get to see the evolution of the Sahara dust. And the reason I'm kind of emphasizing this a little bit more than a bunch of the other factors is because the Sahara dust at this current point, I can confidently say, is the last line of defense before we start seeing hurricanes just firing off left, right, and center, tropical systems firing off left, right, and center, thanks to the MJO and thanks to a bunch of other factors that we'll get to in just a second. But the Sahara dust at this current point in time, what you are seeing with this is you're seeing a decent surge of the dust and a decent surge of dry air moving off of Africa at this current point. However, if we continue to show you what we're looking at this current point, I can show you that much of the main development region really has moistened up quite a bit, at least in the region that tropical cyclones do need to develop in at this current point. And as you're taking a look, yeah, you're seeing a surge of dry air once again in the Caribbean Sea. You're seeing a surge of dry air in the subtropical Atlantic thanks to the Sahara dust over here. However, the dry air is not going to be here forever or anything like that, primarily because the Sahara dust is going to start going away, and you're going to start seeing a lot of these areas start to moisten up thanks to convection over here, and especially once the MJO comes over, because once the MJO comes over, it essentially allows convection to fire up a lot easier, and even though it doesn't factor in wind shear and all of this dry air as well, it does factor in vorticity, it factors in the moisture. No, it doesn't factor in the moisture. It factors in vorticity, it factors in convection. So definitely something to keep an eye on at this current point in time. But meanwhile, what I've been kind of saying is all these storms in the Western Caribbean, they're moistening up the atmosphere even further. So we're kind of seeing those small, minute signs that don't add up to very much right away. But as the days go on, they start to add up to a much better environment for tropical cyclones. So we're going to have to pay deep attention to all these details going forward. And that's why I'm kind of making these videos every day, because, yeah, the details that I'm seeing are relatively small, but this is just to kind of show you the evolution of this tropical cyclone season and why I'm paying so much attention to it. And why I'm paying so much attention to other factors like the ENSO region once and for all. What we're noticing with a few of these regions at this current point, particularly regions 3 and 4, they're starting to drop like a rock at this current point, and we're already halfway down to the La Nina phase. At this current point, we're at negative 0.26 on the index scale at this current point with the SST anomalies below average. It has to get down to minus 0.5 before it is considered a La Nina, but the environment is definitely starting to catch up to the change in the ENSO region at this current point, and what we're seeing is a much more negatively tilted neutral phase than what we were seeing a couple of weeks ago, where both areas were right around neutral or so. And I think the wind shear kind of reacted a little bit more to that, which is why we're starting to see the increase. But as we're starting to see the neutral phase really start to kind of not just really hold on anymore and start to go down to La Nina patterns, we're going to start seeing the atmosphere react in ways that are going to be very beneficial for hurricane season, because I talked about this yesterday a little bit. But if you want the most out of the hurricane season, what you're going to need is either a neutral phase or a weak La Nina. Because if it's the La Nina is too strong, what happens then is it can cause a huge problem when it comes to tropical cyclone development and allow for the Bermuda High and the other steering currents to be too strong for systems to really be moved west or at least north of the Caribbean Sea. We saw that in 2007. That was I think we can go ahead and pull it up right here right over here. In 2007, at this area, it was a very strong La Nina that year. It was really just trending downward heavily. This is the time period right here. It was around 2007 where we had Hurricanes Dean and Felix. But because of the present La Nina and how strong it got, it essentially what it did was it caused the Bermuda High to really strengthen up and keep these hurricanes in the Caribbean Sea instead of pushing them up towards the United States, which is why 2007 isn't as known as other hurricane seasons. But regardless, the damage was already done. Whereas if you take a look at 2004 and 2005 over here, 2004 was a weak El Nino year, which is pretty interesting considering the fact that what we saw, like it was a neutral to weak El Nino, considering the fact that what we ended up seeing was a lot of named storms. We saw 4 hurricanes make landfall in Florida: Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and I believe, and I forgot the name of the last one. Gene. Thank you. Yeah, but it was pretty interesting. And then 2005, what you ended up seeing was you saw that neutral to weak La Nina phase that we're seeing now. And what we saw was 30 named storms, a lot of hurricanes, even a lot of major hurricanes making landfall in the United States. And we're following a similar pattern right now as we continue to see this trend just continuing to, with the ENSO region just completely collapsing out of El Nino. Like, it was a very strong El Nino this year. It got up to 2 degrees Celsius above average, and now we're down to, at least according to this chart we have pulled up here, we're down to minus 0.26 below average. I know it says 0.255. I kind of rounded up just to make it easier on myself. But regardless of what we're seeing at this current point, it's pretty interesting to see how this whole thing will play out. And it kind of shows you that the more active hurricane seasons and the more the hurricane seasons that end up making landfall are either around neutral or weak La Nina. We saw that in 2005 and we saw that a little bit in 2004. Whereas what we're seeing with strong La Ninas is the steering currents get too strong and they push it into the Caribbean and they don't move far enough north to impact the United States like we saw in 2007. So just an important case study to take a look at as we dive deeper into this data right here. But regardless, things are getting pretty interesting in the ENSO region. Let's go and show you regions 1 and 2, kind of just leveling off and stabilizing for the time being. I still expect this to be a downward trend as we start to see cooler sea surface temperatures going on and starting to develop off the coast of Ecuador and off the coast of Peru. It's kind of just leveling off this current point, but I do fully expect a Kelvin wave to push in and allow for this La Nina to continue to persist. And I found it kind of interesting once I saw the official forecast that the La Nina probabilities have gone down quite a bit. I'm partially inclined to agree with that, but I'm partially a little hesitant to say that just because what we're seeing in regions 3 and 4 is a complete collapse in sea surface temperatures. Again, that can change. Things are subject to change. This could oscillate back up a little bit more. However, we're seeing that collapse of SSTs at this current point, and essentially what I'm seeing at this current point is just it's just something that I have a little bit of a bad feeling that that the national NOAA might be missing something just a little bit. Then again, their forecast just came out a couple of days ago. All this downtrending stuff happened in the span of the last 5 days. So again, it could be an isolated incident, but if it starts to be a pattern and we start seeing sea surface temperatures continue to drop like a rock, then that's when I'll start getting concerned. But in the meantime, we have to monitor our few main factors to see what's going on with the tropics at this current point, starting with the global sea surface temperatures right there. The SSTs continue to warm up at a very fast pace. At this current point in time, you're starting to see a lot more 30 plus degrees Celsius or 86 plus degree Fahrenheit waters in much of the Caribbean, especially in the Western Caribbean, off the coast of Cuba over here, and I fully expect that to continue to just kind of move, and I fully expect that to expand throughout the entire Caribbean Sea as we get into late August or early September right there. That's really bad because what we're seeing is we're still seeing all those record sea surface temperatures from last year persist, and because the Caribbean had no hurricanes in it last year, it kind of allowed those SSTs to stay there and allow for it to build up the ocean heat content, which I will get to in just a second. But regardless of that, if we show you the climate reanalyzer, we're still seeing that surge of SSTs. We were kind of talking to you a little bit more about it in depth yesterday. I'm not going to go into as depth today, but all you need to know is that surge in the climb continues, and we can go ahead and give you a more accurate SST map right here. Here's the sea surface temperatures, at least by degree at this current point. This, I feel like, is a bit of a better map to kind of show you in addition to the other map we were showing you over there. But we're seeing, again, those areas of around 30 plus degrees Celsius waters pretty much off the coast of Mexico, off the coast of Texas. Louisiana is at 31. We're seeing a couple 32 degree spots over here in Florida, off the Florida Keys, and off of Cuba over here. We're seeing a huge burst of around 32 degrees Celsius waters out in the Atlantic basin. That has to be an eddy of some sort off the North Atlantic current right there. I think it's kind of interesting. But overall, the main development region continues to heat up and continues to tap into some of these warm waters, and it continues to tap into the North Atlantic current over here, which allows for this thing to end up happening in the first place. But regardless, 27, 28, 29 degrees Celsius across a huge portion of the region has continued to persist, and we're going to have to pay very, very close attention to that as we get more data and more information to start with the hurricane season, because essentially what we're going to see is a bit of a double-edged sword. If hurricane season takes a little bit longer to start because of any reason, whether it's dry air or a bit of an increase of wind shear, the sea surface temperatures, especially in the western half of the Atlantic, are going to increase and are going to continue to surge, which is going to cause a huge problem with the ocean heat content. But the problem with that is just, you know, how long is of a delay are we going to potentially look at? Because if it's going to be a delay of maybe a couple of weeks, then it won't affect the hurricane season forecast that much. But if it's like in 2022 towards the end of August, then that's when you'd start to see that forecast trend downward. But based off everything I've seen, I don't think the latter is going to happen. The former could, like a 1 to 2 week delay from, instead of maybe it's starting in the first week of August, maybe the second or third week of August. That kind of delay is possible, and I've seen that happen on numerous occasions because there's an unexpected burst of Sahara dust or an unexpected surge of wind shear. But what I'm looking at this current point is just all the patterns are showing this thing to really start taking off around the first week of August. So let's go ahead and show you the ocean heat content at this current point. OHC is the main concern with this right here. OHC is continuing to surge across a lot of these areas at this current point in time, so we're going to have to pay very, very close attention to that, and this is the reason why I was so concerned with no hurricanes entering the Caribbean last year, because all that OHC ended up staying put, and now it's starting to build off of what we were seeing last year. Matter of fact, we can go ahead and show you what we were seeing at this point last year in 2023, around July 21st at the time of recording this video. So here's what we had right here. Yeah, we saw a similar amount of OHC, but it was mainly concentrated in the western half of the Caribbean Sea, at least in the northwestern part of it over here, and we were seeing a lot of huge areas. Like we saw a massive eddy of OHC in the Gulf of Mexico. We saw a pretty large area, the loop current over there, so we're going to have to pay attention to that regardless. But here's what we have for 2024. You're seeing a much more, you're seeing a lot of these areas just kind of turn out a lot more. You're starting to see that 125, 150 plus degrees, not degrees, that would be pretty bad, but OHC values really starting, instead of being concentrated in the western half of the Caribbean, it's now across the entire Caribbean, and that's what I was concerned about, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what we are watching with the ocean heat content. There are still a couple of factors you need to take into consideration at this current point. So here's what we have with the wind shear. Right now, the wind shear patterns continue to trend up and down, up and down, up and down. We're on a bit of a downward phase across the western half of the Atlantic. When the subtropical and northern tropical Atlantic, you're starting to see a bit more of an uptrend with the shear over there. That's not going to ultimately affect things long term because of the oscillation time. This could be completely gone in a day. This could be completely surged in a day. This could be completely wiped out in a couple of weeks. Regardless of what we're seeing, it's just something that you're going to have to pay attention to and watch day by day. This is one of those things you have to watch day by day. Same with this dry air that we were kind of talking to you about a little bit earlier. So ultimately, that's the three big things I'm paying attention to right now. So yeah, I almost said at this current point, which I already said it, but I know it's a bad habit. I know a couple of people in the comments have been telling me, hey, you need to break those habits. I know I'm trying. It's a little bit hard to do, but I'm sorry, I'm working on it. But anyway, let's go ahead and get to the shear and the moisture forecast just to kind of wrap this up in a nice little bow, just so that way you guys can go home with a little bit of food for thought. We're going to start with the 200 to 850 millibar wind shear at this time. So here's what we have at least going on with the European. This is courtesy of the European 0Z run. This was initialized at 7 o'clock last night, but we didn't get this data until overnight. So your guys are kind of getting it fresh right then and there. So here's what we have going on. You're seeing those oscillations happen. You're going to see a bit of an increase of wind shear in the Caribbean and parts of the Gulf of Mexico in the next few days or so. However, I fully expect it to start weakening in the next few days. After that, by day 5, the entire Gulf of Mexico is once again in a low wind sheared environment. Caribbean really starts to surge in wind shear over here, which again, you're going to see that happen right there. And you're also noticing the Bermuda high really just starts staying in place a lot more. And yes, even though it kind of oscillates back and forth between the Bermuda and Azores high at a semi-regular basis, you saw that Bermuda high really parked there for the last a week or so. So ultimately, that's what we're paying attention to. And then what we're looking at with the main development region, you start seeing that open for business at this time right there, around 240 hours out. So, yeah, you start to see this open for business, and all it takes is one tropical wave to come off and start organizing with these good conditions right there, coupled with a decrease of dry air. So this is what we have, the moisture component to all of this right here. The moisture component, what you're seeing here is you're going to see that surge of Sahara dust continue to persist. You're going to see some dry air just kind of surge into the Caribbean Sea. That's going to be pretty typical. That's going to happen at least for the rest of the month right there. But as we start getting later into the month, around July 24th, July 25th, you really start to see the main development region really start to show a robust area of moisture right there, which I got to pay attention to right there because, yeah, I don't think there's going to be much tropical development with that one that's right now in the central MDR over here where my cursor is. But what could lead to it is what happens next right after that, where you see a very active monsoon over here in the Sahel region coming off of Africa. That looks like a pretty robust tropical wave in the next 10 days or so. And then you also start to see that increase of the Azores high pushing a lot of the Sahara dust to Europe. So that's ultimately what we're looking at, and we can go ahead and show you the anomalies once again at this current time. And the anomalies that we're seeing right there, it is a bit more or less on average compared to what we're seeing, which that is ultimately a little bit of good news. We can show you what we were seeing previously at this current point. Yeah, the forecast really downtrended on a lot of this dry air and a lot of this moisture over here, which ultimately I do think is pretty interesting to take a look at. But overall, it's something you're going to have to watch day by day, and we will continue to update you day by day here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But until that time, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out and helps us make more videos like these. We are so close to 9,000 subscribers, so be sure you hit the subscribe button. It would be very appreciated and would help me continue my work of informing you of what's going on on with the weather. Remember, if you want to come hang out with us at Storms United, be sure to join our Discord server. Link to that is right over there. And the goal of this channel, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather, no matter where you are from, whether it's the US, Canada, the Caribbean, Mexico, all those areas. I will keep you informed. With that being said, have a wonderful day. Stay safe.